Hi, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted on this episode to be talking with a person who's worked in the world of radio, I believe. Is that right?
Yes. Yep.
Currently working in the world of comics creator Jeff Messer. Jeff, thank you
Hey,
for jumping in.
thank you so much for inviting me. It's always fun to talk. I was in radio, so I did 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. So, like, give me a signal like a producer would if I start running on too long, because I know the brief chat is not something that exists in my vocabulary. Apparently.
No worries at all. That is totally fine. That works. And I appreciate your expertise in radio. I was contacted by somebody that was going to be on the show and wound up not being on the show to do a voiceover of all things.
Nice.
Yeah, and
That's
so
where
I got to do that.
that's where the real money is in Hollywood. Those voice actors.
I guess. I don't know.
You get to work in your pajamas.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
now that the strike is over, maybe I can break into the voice acting field. We'll see. Who knows?
It's very, very difficult. I understand the people that have those jobs. They fight with every ounce of their being to prevent people like us from
Ah,
competing with them.
gotcha. All right.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
good.
Makes
Maybe
sense.
try books on tape or something first. Kind of ease toward them a little bit.
Hmm. Not voicing on an animated series for Batman or something right away. That would be fun. That would
Yeah.
be the dream.
Oh, tons of fun. What's terrible is that animated movies now are casting people like Chris Pratt to
Hmm.
start, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, no. He already has the acting career. You don't need him to also be taking voice acting roles, right? But
Makes sense.
they're
Makes
always
sense.
casting people. But whatever.
Yes.
It made Mark Hamill have a much longer career when he pivoted,
Absolutely.
but he pivoted. So,
Hmm. True,
but
true.
I digress.
Yes. No worries, no worries. It's a good side path to be on talking about sharing stories, I guess, is the general
Yeah.
theme there between the radio and comics. So I'm going to mention a couple of titles that I know you for, a couple of creative worlds, and at least one collaboration, and then excited to dig in a little bit more. So, of course, one of those being you've worked in the world of Robin Hood. You've done comics work in the world of Robin Hood.
Yes, which originally started from before radio.
Hmm.
I started out in theater, and when I was much younger, I toured as an actor for a couple of years before going to college. And a friend of mine and I wrote a Robin Hood stage play, which we were in our early 20s, going, why has no one ever done a Robin Hood stage play? This seems like a no
Hmm.
brainer. Come on, because
Hmm.
you think all the big hit productions and all these things, and we said, oh, let's do it. We'll write it. We'll write it. And so we start writing, and within like the third page or the fourth page of the script, Robin Hood pulls out an arrow and fires it. And go, whoa, wait a minute. Okay. That might be why no one has written one of these before.
Hmm.
Um, so we had to come up with creative ways to fake firing arrows on stage, because it's like, oh, that's what he's known for, the bow and arrow.
Hmm.
And we did. We wrote the play. It was very successful. It's been produced a handful of times. It's like a big stunt show almost. And
Hmm.
in 2018, the Montford Park Players, I think it's one of the country's longest running Shakespeare companies. They're at least in their 52nd year now, or something like that. They've been around for a half a century, and they asked to do it, and so we had it produced in an outdoor amphitheater setting in 2018, and it became the most financially and attendance wise successful show of their entire existence.
Wow.
There were huge crowds, and the co-writer, buddy of mine, Robert Akers, he and I were there one night, and we were just like, maybe it's time for us to put this in a different medium. And we had talked about, oh, wouldn't it be great if it went into a TV version or whatever, a film version. And every 10 years or so, they make a Robin Hood movie that sets the entire legend back 50 years. It seems like that's what they do. So we were like, well, what about graphic novels? What about comic books? And so that's where we went. We decided to adapt and expand what we did as a stage play into a comic book series.
Love it, love it. Well, and thinking about that visual kind of writing, I imagine that's very similar to the work that you would do in the writing side of a comic as well.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. It's
Hmm.
very between the stage play and the comic. In theater, you have to pick your moments that you tell the story within, and it's a lot more verbose.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
in comics, we were able to, oh, let's start months before the beginning of the play and show the character in the Middle East, and in the Crusades, and then coming home and show the
Hmm.
effect of that. And the artist that we found to work with lives in England, and he's a great artist named Chris Geary, and he has a very cinematic style.
Nice.
And so the first 8 or 10 pages are just these wide, kind of almost wide screen, if you will, on a page, views of this epic battle that goes on, and the
Hmm.
repercussions of it, and it's just like you couldn't do this on stage. So there's some things that we're able to do now that are making the story better, I think.
Yeah, yeah, very cool, very cool. I'll also mention I'm a high school English teacher. I think I can use this word, sex, spies, and rock and roll. If I'm not
Yes,
able to
yes.
use that, I'll bleep it out. I'll insert like the word sheep or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in fornication, spies, and rock and roll takes the alliteration out of it. It takes the
True, true.
the, and it was it's a play on, of course, sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then there was the movie Sex, Spies, and Videotape and all that. I get all kinds of iterations of that title from people all the time. But yeah, that for me, the pandemic came at a bizarre time, as I was starting to get into doing comics,
Hmm.
or wanting to do comics. And I was, full steam ahead, and then suddenly stuck at home. And so instead of sort of just wallowing in that, I redoubled my efforts in getting stuff out there, and I dug up these. My son was in high school and getting ready to go to college, and I discovered for the first time that he was writing a screenplay, which he
Wow.
had kept hidden from all of us. And I was like, well, this is bizarre. And I'd been a playwright for a number of years when he was much younger, so I dragged him to theater all the time, and so he saw how the sausage was made and had a real behind the scenes perspective of it. So I think he was intimidated to show me
Hmm.
anything that he had written, because that's his frame of reference for me is like, well, he does that weird play thing and he goes and writes, and then people stand up and shout his words at each other on a stage. Um, but he showed it to me, and it really hit a chord, because it reminded me of the same kind of stupid stuff I was writing when I was in high school, which was, in the 1980s, I wanted to be a spy novelist. I wanted to write these
Hmm.
epic kind of globe-trotting spy adventures that were, um, very, very soap operatic, James Bondian kind of thing. And it really made me go back, and I dug out some of the old stuff. I'm a pack rat when it comes to that. I still have the original handwritten notebooks from 1986, 87, whatever.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And I tried in the 90s when I had a word processor. These kids today, they don't understand. I had a word processor, and I tried to type it and do the novel proper. And prose was not easy for me. Plays became easy. I was already doing theater at that point in time, and so it was easy to write plays where you just write the dialogue.
Hmm.
And prose just really bogged me down, because I would go down this path of describe. Once you walk into a room with a character and describe one object, you're stuck. It's J.R.R. Tolkien, 20 pages on how a Hobbit cooks a breakfast,
Right,
and I
right.
was just like, I can't do it. So I abandoned it back in 1994. But the pandemic made me brush it off, and I looked at it and I thought, I wonder if this works. And I had adapted the first chapter of my spy novel into an issue of a comic book script. Found an artist, sent it to him. He drew based on references I gave. And he was an artist in Thailand, so we don't speak the same language. Everything's done through Translate, and
Hmm.
he wasn't even born in the 80s. So I'm like, I don't know that he's going to get this, but I liked his style. I thought it would be suitable, and I gave him some descriptions, and he sent me 7 character drawings that were as if they walked right out of my brain onto the page.
Nice.
And I thought, God, I can't not do this now.
Yeah, yeah,
Because you know, against all odds, this kid from Thailand seems to understand, 1980s American pop culture, rock and roll, all of this stuff. And we're 5 issues into a 10 issue series
hmm
with over the past couple of years, but it really rejuvenated my young, so I feel like I'm living a second childhood, with,
love it.
oh, what are you doing now? Oh, I'm working in comic books, after all the other things that I've done. And, it just feels like it landed in my lap almost accidentally in starting in 2019 and then going into the pandemic. And I thought, man, I would be a fool not to indulge this, to
Yeah,
scratch this itch. And boy, it's been fun. It's been
yeah,
ridiculous fun. Yeah.
and fun material to read. I mean, I'm a person that went away from comics for a while, came back to it. I've studied comics. I've used them in classrooms, all the things, and I've just grown an appreciation for them as something to enjoy, and something that just works and connects. So I appreciate a lot about comics.
It was one of those things where when I was a kid, before I was in school, I was reading comics. And I say
Mm,
reading, you have to throw some air quotes around reading. But, I was an avid comic book fan from the age of 5.
yeah,
My
yeah.
grandfather, he randomly brought home a comic book from the corner store, and it transfixed me in a way that never let go. And
hmm
then, a couple of years later, the original Star Wars movie came out of the movie theaters. I saw that on the big screen, and I got the comic book adaptation of it
hmm
that came out, and it was just uh, to work against the Star Wars famous quote. There was no hope for me at that point. I was completely lost.
Yeah, yeah. I miss the adaptations of films because that was a big thing that connected me as a reader too. I would see the adaptation, go see the film, reread the adaptation, read the novel adaptation, all of those things. Uh,
Same here, man. I did the exact
yeah.
same thing. In fact, the thing that cemented me as I think wanting to be a writer was Star Wars. People don't have a proper perspective. And I think this is why they don't do comic adaptations anymore, is because, well, it's on streaming or it's on DVD, or, to go backwards, it was on VHS a
hmm
year later. It was on DVD 6 months later. It's on streaming 6 weeks later. There's no, there's no sense of not having the
hmm
movie if you want it. And when I was a kid, and when you were younger, a
hmm
movie came out in the movie theater, and for all you knew, this was the only chance you were ever going to encounter this movie.
hmm hmm
If it was something like Star Wars, they had the comics and the storybooks and the novelizations, and they had all of the stuff that went with it, but it wasn't the same. But when I saw Star Wars, I was 7, and I went home, and for reasons that I just can't even explain, in hindsight, I decided I wanted to hold it in my head as long as possible. So I got loose leaf paper and I wrote my own adaptation of Star Wars
Love
from
it.
memory, from a
hmm
7 year old's memory, which, the things I misinterpreted, the things I got wrong. And I would write about half of a page and then get bored. And then I would draw a picture at the bottom to go with whatever, the top of the page story was. And
hmm
it was about 30 pages, maybe 30
That's
pages.
pretty sizable.
Um, it turned out to be a pretty good chunk, and I wound up doing that as a habit for years. I still have my adaptations of Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back,
Love it.
but I know somewhere in my mother's archives there must be the Battlestar Galactica and Raiders of the Lost Ark
hmm
adaptations that I did, which it kills me now because I'm like, I wouldn't know, oh, where are they? I know they must be somewhere and just can't put my hands on them. But yeah, I was very dialed into I want to hold on to this experience, and so the only way to do it was to sort of write it down while it was fresh, and it took me
hmm
about a week to do it, and it was such a fulfilling kind of experience,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Uh, it awakened something creative inside of me, and I thought this, being able to tell a story and to tell it well is a gift.
Hmm. Hmm.
And to be inspired by good storytellers, and then to hopefully be able to turn around and do it yourself, um, just there's nothing better. And so from that point on, I mean, since 1977, I've been doomed to be a storyteller. So
Yeah, yeah. It's a good doom. It's a good doom.
yeah, I
Yeah,
accept it wholeheartedly.
yeah.
And now it's paying off. Now I had a high school buddy of mine who read those spy novels, much better
Hmm.
writer than I was, a guy named Donald Trull, and I respected him, so I gave him my manuscripts as I was working on them, and he red penned the hell out of the first 100 pages or so. And when I popped up with Sex Spies and Rock and Roll crowdfunding, and I was promoting it on social media, he was like, "Hey, wait a minute, something about this seems vaguely familiar."
Hmm.
And he reached out and he said, "Is this that?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is that." I've
Hmm.
gone back to 1988, 87, 88, and resurrected, my stupid, spy stuff, but put a different spin on it, fixed it. It's
Hmm.
still set in the 80s. It still has a lot of, rock music, pop culture references, and but it's got this retro, tongue-in-cheek kind of attitude that didn't exist before. That I think makes it a lot more fun. And when I came up with the title "Sex, Spies, and Rock and Roll," which was not an original title, that's new. That's new for the comics, because I
Hmm.
was like,
Hmm.
what sells? What's going to sell it? And I thought, well, this is a good working title, and it just sort of stuck. And so when I ask artists to work on it, and I send them scripts, and there's whatever, a scene of an adult content that happens in it, I'm often shocked at what comes back from the artists,
Hmm. Hmm.
because let's just say Italian artists that I've worked with, women, female Italian artists, have sent me pages, and I've been like, oh my God, my American sensibilities are just, I'm getting the vapors over here. And they think
Right.
nothing of it. They think nothing of it. It's not taboo to them. And so I've had to embrace that a little bit. Like, okay, but I'm going to keep it fun and light and funny for the most part.
Hmm.
Um, to sort of diffuse people going, oh, you're just a smut peddler now, or
Right, right.
whatever they want to say. So I try to keep it light and fun, and serious when it needs to be, but
Yeah, yeah. And story centered always.
always a function of the story. And like a lot of things, in retrospect, because back then James Bond is so cool. He
Hmm.
gets with like 3 women per movie, and that's Roger Moore in his 50s, and he's still able to chase these women. And you look back on it and go, how utterly ridiculous that is. And
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
happened when I revisited this is I discovered that the main character of the story wasn't the dudes that I aspired in my mind to want to be like when I was writing it as a teenager, but the
Hmm.
main character is the lead female character.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I decided that, I was like, what if she's the one who is kind of in the driver's seat, to turn the 80s the 80s over sexualization thing around,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
put her in control. And the dudes, much like reality, are clueless. They're
Right.
they're not remotely in control of the when, the where, and the how,
Hmm.
and just sort
Hmm.
of whatever, they're there for whatever. And I thought, well, let's make the female character the focus. Let's make her the pivot point for all of the stories that we're telling. And she's the one that's kind of the smartest and the most in charge, and a little James Bondian in that she's confident in her sexuality and not being exploited.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not choosing to not be exploited, but to use to her advantage her feminine wiles. And so I thought this is a much better way to tell that story now, in the post Me Too era,
Hmm.
than
Hmm.
it would be to kind of. I went back and watched some of the old Roger Moore James Bond movies, and I'm like,
Yeah.
today, yeah, this would change a lot. They would not make the same movie for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. The Daniel Craig era definitely updated and found some contemporary footing for sure.
Yes, yeah, yeah, and it has to. You know,
Yeah.
whether you what no matter what political thing you believe, it's like there is evidence that we are evolving
Hmm. Hmm.
slowly. You know, it's a snail's pace
Hmm.
to us, but in the grander scheme of things, yeah, we're evolving.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so some of us are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was going to ask about some of your collaborations as well, because I know
Sure.
that there's a person named Mike Grell
Hmm.
that is part of your story. So curious to hear about that, as well as any other collaborators, supporters that have been positive voices along the way.
That very first comic book that my grandfather brought home was
Hmm.
drawn by Mike Grell,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you know, um, it was the first art I recognized. It was the first name that I recognized, and so when I was a teenager, and he was doing creator owned, much more adult oriented stuff, contemporary stuff. Over at First Comics, John Sable Freelance was the series that really caught my attention in the early mid '80s. So I was about maybe 14 when
Hmm.
I was able to get my hands on and read some of that stuff because it was direct market. So it was harder to find living in a small town. But without him knowing it, he became a real mentor of mine. You know, I would read interviews that he would do in the Comics Buyer's Guide or Comic Scene or Comic Interview or Amazing Heroes or any of those publications, and I would learn things from him, talking about how he approaches story and does all of this. And I didn't meet him until 2011, and a near miss when I was 16. He was at a comic store signing, and I was at the wrong store. There were
Oh,
two stores in Charlotte, and he was there Saturday at one store, Sunday at the other store, and I was at the wrong store on Saturday. It was just, but anyway, but I did meet him years later, and when I was in radio, I got really the imposter syndrome is a tough thing
absolutely. Yeah.
for creative people, and I was in radio and having that ability to reach out to virtually anyone within reason and go, I would like to interview you on my radio show.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
amazing. I had a talk radio show, and I wound up getting interviews with musicians who would tour through town. Like at
Nice.
this point, 10 years ago or so, mainstream radio was overly programmed. So it's like, if a band came through town, the rock station is like, I don't have any room to bring them into the studio or talk to them. And I was like, oh, I'm on the AM station and I've got 3 hours to fill. Yes, Toad the Wet Sprocket is back together and they're coming to Asheville. I'm going to invite them in to play a 3 or 4 song acoustic set in my studio. And I
Nice.
did it, and once or twice in a row early on, it worked. And I would reach out to people and they would say yes. Oh, this is fantastic. So I started a little side podcast that was a geek pop culture podcast. And
Hmm.
I interviewed several comic book people. Wound up interviewing Steve Rude and Joe Staten and some other folks, and of course Mike Grell was like the big white whale, for me. And I did. I reached out and interviewed him, and we became corresponding, you know, buddies via that for a couple of years, 2013, 2014, 2015. And then I was at a convention with him in 2015 where it was just nothing happening. It was dead. It was just a sleepy little small town kind of con. And I just hung out with him for the weekend, and we hit it off and became legitimately friends as a
Hmm.
result. And when I got out of radio in 2017, I kind of approached him and I said, Mike, what about what about Kickstarter? What about crowdfunding? You've got, you know, a substantial audience.
Hmm.
Big
Hmm.
companies aren't calling these legends to come and work for them anymore, but you certainly have an audience that would follow you somewhere. Why don't you do that? And it took a couple of years because it was kind of a foreign concept to him, but he decided, yeah, let's give it a try. And of course, about a year before the pandemic started is when we decided to get into the crowdfunding self publishing thing, which was just Jim Dandy timing on
Hmm.
everybody's
Right.
part. Let's make this as difficult as humanly possible to
Right.
print and publish comics for the next 3 years. But we did it, and it's been successful. But in the interim of that, what really pushed it over the top was in 2017. I got out of radio and was trying to freelance. I thought I'm going to do freelance, maybe for Tomorrow's Publishing for Back Issue Magazine or something like that. So I reached out to
Hmm.
them and I said, "Hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. I would love to do some articles for you guys. Whatever." And at that point, it had sort of, I guess, was at least well enough known that I knew Mike Grell for whatever reason, because I'd interviewed him and obviously I knew him.
Hmm.
And they came back and said, "Hey, we're working on a book about Mike Grell, and we've kind of hit a bit of a roadblock, and we need somebody to come in and collaborate on the project and kind of help us get it across the finish line." And I thought, well, perfect. I will absolutely do that. That's such a pleasure to do. It came out in 2018, and promptly in 2019, it got nominated for an Eisner Award at the San Diego Comic Con,
Nice. Nice.
and so there I was, you know, July in 2019 in San Diego, trying to keep the imposter syndrome, tamped
Right.
down. But I was just like, what in the world has happened? What
Hmm.
happened to me that I'm here and in this place with this grand opportunity, this doorway opening to me in this time and place. And that's around the time we'd started the project with Mike with Kickstarter. And so I thought it's a foregone conclusion. I should be doing this. And so, here we are 4 years later, roughly.
Hmm.
Um, Several very successful campaigns. Recently, I've been working with Bo Hampton, who
Nice.
Mike and I hang out with a lot on the road when we go to cons. Bo put an art book out this past summer that I helped him with on Kickstarter. He's got a project that's up, a Halloween launch that's over in early December, and just other people. I mean, now that I'm helping Mike, other people will stop me at conventions because now I've been seen with Mike enough,
Hmm.
that they're like, "Hey, you're that guy that helps Mike with his publishing. I got an idea. Why don't you let's talk about this or talk about that?" So I've talked to several creators and kind of in that age group, that class that Mike's in, who are trying to figure out ways to stay active in the business and
Hmm.
have significant fan bases that support them, but don't have publishers who sadly will give them the time of day, which is
That's
a real
crazy.
tragedy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that really is.
it's very frustrating to see. Uh, but I've got to know Bob Hall out on the road, and we've talked about projects. I briefly talked with Howard Chaykin about a project. He just finished a crowdfunding thing that was a huge success.
Hmm.
And others, and I kind of get some of these guys to draw Robin Hood pinups for me, and Bo has done some variant covers for me. Trevor Von Eden did a variant cover. Ron Randall has been a great friend, and he's hugely successful at Kickstarter on his own, so he doesn't need my help at all. But he did a pinup for me and stuff. It's kind of become this weird thing where I was a fan from a distance, queued up in the Comic Con line to get an autograph, and now I'm legitimately sitting there in the conversation with these guys that are legends
Yeah.
because I faked my way long enough to the point where I actually know. I was like, oh, I actually learned how to do this now, and boy, it's fun. But I'm having fun. See, these guys look at it as this is a job and this is a career, and they take it very seriously. And I'm going, dude, as long this is my wife will say this, as long as what you're doing is not losing money, I don't care if you're making money, as long as you're happy. So
Nice.
that's been the key, and that's you know, like I said, keeping me young, second childhood.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Well, and you're being very humble there in saying that you faked your way in, I would say.
See, there's the thing, and this is I'm going to say Mike Grell has stolen this from me,
Mhm.
because he has a bunch of sort of canned answers because he gets asked the same questions a lot,
Sure, sure.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, all these guys do. And so he has a couple of answers that are just hysterical, and I can almost do them verbatim sitting next to him at a panel. But there was this stuff I've said that he's stolen now, and I'm like, I'm so happy. But one of them was, the actor thing, like
Hmm.
working in theater, the fake it until you make it thing is so valuable. If
Mhm.
you're an actor and you're auditioning for, let's say a TV commercial, and they go, there's a scene in this commercial in a barnyard where you're riding a horse and you've got a rope and you're roping a fence post. Can you do that? Every actor says, "Yeah, I can do that."
Mhm.
And chances are you'll have at least a couple of days to figure out how to do it. You know,
Right.
do you play tennis? Yes. Can you flip pizza dough in the air? Yes. Can you scuba dive? Yes. Because you don't want to say no. Because if you say no, they may not come back to you.
Mhm.
But if
Mhm.
you're always a yes person, you're like, oh yeah, I can do it. So it's a fake it till you make it kind of thing, where
Yeah.
you can teach yourself whatever skills you need
Mhm.
to get
Mhm.
through the next moment, to get you to that next level. And that's always been kind of the way I look at life.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
fake it till you make it. So even if I have no confidence in myself, if I lie to somebody else and tell them yes, I know what I'm doing, it forces me to have to do it. So here I am, 53 years in, and and suddenly making funny books.
Yeah.
What happened, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, living the dream. Living the dream.
Yeah, absolutely, loving every minute of it.
Well, I'm curious by means of a final question, creative vision moving forward
Mhm.
and where folks can go to learn more.
Um, Man, moving forward is just kind of more of the same. It's a
Hmm.
self-perpetuating thing, and it's got to be the coolest. Uh, a lot of people, writers, will say, you stare at a blank page until droplets of blood fall out of your forehead and form words on the pages, and sometimes it can be tough
Hmm.
as a writer. It's never been tough for me. I've never suffered with writer's block per se, and it may be because I'm not a great writer. Uh, it's like, oh yeah, greatness. It's like I'm not trying to achieve greatness. I'm trying to have fun and just tell entertaining stories. And I think there's a pretension that comes along with being a creative,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
if you decide to lean into that pretension, it's just, it's so obnoxious to me. I want nothing to do with that. I want to
Right.
be making fun of myself along the way. And the more I write, the more stories that I do, the more ideas. I'm working on a script and I go, oh, oh, if I drop this clue here, I've got a whole other story that I can spin off down the road,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
create a character and go, oh, this character I will use elsewhere too. And it perpetuates. It just kind of keeps growing and growing and growing. It's kind of like watching dough rise,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know, and so that's it for me. Is like I just keep going, and what happens is the trail ahead keeps getting further and further out to the end. It's
Yeah.
the journey, not the destination. I'm trying to keep doing what I'm doing, and know that more stuff will keep following it or keep coming along, and being around people who are creative and following other creators, who kind of inspire me too, is very important. I think so.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's it. Just kind of more of the same. I don't have a master plan to get rich. I will buy a lottery ticket every so often just in case.
Mhm.
But otherwise, I'll just kind of keep doing what I'm doing. And if people want to check out the stuff, mostly I'm on Facebook with my own personal stuff, because it's Facebook has replaced websites,
Yes. Yeah.
and Instagram has replaced Facebook. There's some progression going on, but Facebook is basically like your personal website now. So I have my own page. I have a political satire comedy page called Maintaining an Election, which is kind of my only holdover from my radio politics days,
Uh-huh.
and it's not very heavily populated. But you know, election time is coming in the next year, so it may get some more activity if I feel
True.
particularly politically satirical. But I also have Robin Hood Comic Book Adventures dedicated Facebook page, and a Sex Spies and Rock and Roll Comics dedicated Facebook page, where I'm just accumulating followers, and then I hope that 10% of them jump into the Kickstarter whenever I launch one, and I'll
Mhm.
be launching several in the beginning of next year. We've published the first two volumes of the Robin Hood graphic novel series. The first one is also out in the UK through Shift Presents as a publisher over there, who picked it up and are putting it out in the UK. So we're super
Great,
happy with that.
great, great.
And Sex, Spies, and Rock and Roll. There's going to be several projects next year, more Robin Hood, and we're working fast on some hardcover editions of Mike Grell's John Sable Freelance, oversized hardcover definitive editions, really beautiful books. We're about to go to press on volume two. There will be 5 total volumes, and we'll be doing a campaign to fund volume three probably in February, March, somewhere around there. So keeping that train going too, keeping Mike young as long as we can.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, it sounds like you are a very busy man with lots in progress, lots on the way,
Yet I
and
spend so much time doing nothing. It's astounding. So, those days you just sort of sit around and go, I should be doing something today. But yeah.
all right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Glad to talk with you, and glad to have you back anytime.
Jason, my pleasure. Keep up the good work, and you teach, right? What are
I
your
did
age ranges?
right now high school. I've done middle school and university level stuff too, so a nice range.
Give me your address, and you have a free box of Robin Hood graphic novels coming to you for your students.
Fantastic. Thank you so
Yeah, just give
much.
me give me your info. One
I
of the
will do
things that
that.
we like to do with the Robin Hood Project is we give free copies to children's hospitals and to teachers who want them in the classrooms, and
Fantastic.
we've distributed 700 or 800 copies in the past couple of years. So, and I've gotten to the point now where I will take copies with me when I'm going to conventions. We did an educational young Robin Hood comic aimed at middle schoolers, and I just have them on the table free to kids and teachers. Just grab one and go, take it. It's got a little educational supplement inside. Um, trying to give back a little bit
Yeah.
along the way. Although when I have a table at the convention, it's very bizarre. If it's an 8 foot table, there's like 3 feet of family friendly. Here's Robin Hood, and then there's me in the middle, and then over here there's 3 feet of adults only.
Right, right.
Sex, spies, and rock. It's the strangest thing. So I may have to start getting 2 tables and have somebody pretend to be me at another part of the convention floor at some point.
It's a plan. It's a plan. That shows some great range, though. That's great
It
range.
does, and it does get people to stop, and they look, and then they look, and they're like, "What? That's weird." Like, yeah, I have range.
That's right. That's right.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I have range.
Yeah.
So
Well, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. I will be glad to share copies with my students, and
great, great.
yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, glad to have you back anytime as projects are coming along, and it's been wonderful to talk with you.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. Would love to come back. I would love to send Mike Grell and Bo Hampton and some other guys your way too.
Thank
If you
you. That would be great.
want
Neither one of them have been on. That would be wonderful.
to, excellent. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm certainly glad to hook that up. Although beware, uh, Mike, you need a lot of extra length of recording tape sometimes because he's got stories and he's not afraid to tell them.
Sounds great. I look forward to it.
For sure.
All
Thank you,
right.
Jason.
Thank you so much.
Take care.